Good morning, beautiful people of the internet, as Jay would say. He's not with us this morning, sadly, but you got the rest of us. We've got Piotr, good morning,
Morning.
and Adam here, and me from sunny but very windy Malta. Excuse me. Yes, so we're very prepared today. It makes a change for us, doesn't it? We really know what we're talking about today. Of course, we're going to dive into Adam's Sunday special, his supplement, looking at the budget, but we're also going to look at property transactions and the risks, our favorite R word, the risks involved with those and how you can kind of buffer yourself against those. And then I'm also going to have my little two penneth on because it was obviously International Women's Day this week, a cause very close to my heart. Big shout out to the property sisters who's watching. If you are watching, drop us a note, tell us where you're watching from, say hi to us. And you know, we just love comments, we love questions, we'll read them out. If you've got something, a burning question, pop it in the comments wherever you're watching us. And if you are watching, please do subscribe, give us a follow, because it really helps us reach and help even more people. So,
wow, amazing. I don't think Jay has ever done such good introduction. I think.
Do you know what? Can you tell? I recorded my first podcast episode this week, so I'm full in the flow of that.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I'm. There's a really successful podcast here called The She Word, run by she's amazing, Trudy Kerr. She's a broadcaster. She used to be a drive time. I known her when I first started coming to Malta on the radio as a drive time DJ, and she does an amazing, it's called The She Word podcast. And the strap line for me is just genius. I think about it every day. It's called Conversations That Women Rarely Have, but Really Should. And I just love that. And she's kind of branched out. There's a spin-off for a young women's edition. So Sasha Vella hosts that because it's, you know, they're just different conversations. Me and Trudy are of a certain vintage, shall we say, and that's not our kind of frame of reference. So Sasha does that. And then Trudy also wanted to do a women in business, because again, that's a very specific subject, very specific topics. And she wanted to launch that. So she asked me to be the host of that. So we're having a mini series of 7 episodes talking about everything from mentorship, entrepreneurship, imposter syndrome, burnout, topic obviously very close to my heart. What else have we got? Breaking norms, reinventing yourself. We've got all sorts in there. But again, really exploring those topics and really going into them that maybe we don't talk about freely enough. So recorded the first episode on Friday. I'm absolutely buzzed about it. But yeah, that's why I'm like, I've got really like saggy eyes and baggy eyes because I'm knackered. You know, me and logistics, it's just not my thing. But having to organise all that and juggle guests, because we have 3 women per show, me hosting it, 3 women per show, you know, all experts in their field or with relevant experience. Honestly, some amazing women. I know we always go, amazing women. No, these are like amazing women. We have on one of the shows, we've got the first and only helicopter pilot in the Maltese Armed Forces. So she's going to be on. We've got the only female Michelin star chef that's on MasterChef here in Malta. She's going to be a guest. We've got psychologists. We've got advisors to angel investors, entrepreneurs. We've got so many cool and lovely women. I am super excited, as you can tell. About it.
Well, you are excited. It's been 4 minutes and Adam hasn't said a word.
Well, look, we can't frustrate him any longer then. Over to you, Adam.
No, okay. Over to
That's
you,
all right. I was enjoying. You can happily do another 40 minutes of that. That sounds brilliant. And it's lovely to see there's nothing like a passion project as well. That's the thing, to get the juices flowing, and that comes across. Yeah, I can touch it through the screen, Helen. So that's wonderful. Actually, looking forward to listening to it.
Just while we're on that, so there's that, but there's also something else, like again related to it, but hugely passionate about. And again, like it's very ambitious, but We're going to do it. We are doing an international women's conference here in Malta. And honestly, Malta has never seen anything like this before. I was involved in a women's conference here last year. And when I was on that, I would just like, we need something like this here every year. And again, Trudy came and said, we're doing this. It's 2 days. And it's not just a local, obviously we'll spotlight the amazing women here, local women, you know, CEOs, running things, entrepreneurs, all sorts, but we're making it international. So we have international speakers flying in. We've got Michaela Wayne. Obviously, most people know her from The Apprentice, and I know her through the Women in Construction community. She set up the Women in Construction Awards, and she's just, you know, she's equally as passionate about this topic, these topics, you know, women representation and engagement as I am. So she's going to be one of our keynote speakers on Trudy. So that's the first day. It's the Women in Business Day, the first day. And then on the second day, it's Women in the World. So it's kind of more general issues. We've got a panel, again, totally speaks to me, menopause to menstruation to menopause. So we're diving into all those topics, because we had our own episode, didn't we, on World Menopause Day, where we had the lovely Adele come in and speak to us and, yeah, shed so much light on that topic. And Trudy's got a fabulous, she's an influencer, but not like the fluffy kind. She's all about body positivity. She's a young mum with a young daughter. So she's flying in. She's American, but she's flying in from Italy. So she's going to be joining us. And gosh, there's a whole host of other people that we haven't announced yet, so I can't tell you, but watch this space. But I'll put the link to the tickets. We literally launched on Friday, so tickets are available. And if you want good seats, because it's theatre style, please hurry and get your tickets now, because that gold section will definitely sell out. We know it will. So yeah.
And when is it, Helen? Sorry,
it's the 24th and 25th of May.
Right. Okay. Fabulous. Not that long then. Not that long. Couple of months.
No pressure.
I was going to say, but yeah, jolly good. Should be fabulous.
It will.
Brilliant.
It really will. But it's, yeah, I've created 2 whole new full-time jobs that I didn't really know. It wasn't really in my plan. But hey ho, we'll do it.
Brilliant. Right, well, definitely at record level before we started supplement breakdown. You're quite right. So it was only 9,577 words as well. So we should be fine to just squeeze that into the rest of the time. But it was, I went after the budget in quite a big way, in terms of what was Jeremy Hunt actually working from and with. So what did the Office for the Bloody Ridiculous, as I prefer to call them, but the Office for Budgetary Responsibility, what did they have to say, and what were their forecasts saying, and where were the holes in them? Because surprise, surprise, I reckon there are a few. But I also wanted this time round to take a look at what a couple of the more respected think tanks thought about the budget. And I chose one from left of centre, one from right of centre, none of the sort of lunatic ones that are funded by some dodgy guy somewhere, you know, who's a multi-centi millionaire, who's trying to influence the media in the UK, not naming any names. But of course, media outlets have been owned by relatively dangerous media barons for many, many years. And you could name plenty on both the left and the right, actually, if you were honest. So it's one of those things. But social media, one of the positives of social media that never gets spoken about is actually it has been able to fight that traditional, in the same way that cable TV diluted the 4 terrestrial channels or whatever, it has been able to dilute the narrative. There are downsides to that, in that lots of people start believing fake news, because if people tell better stories, then people tend to listen and believe them. But I don't think that's much different from the people who used to read the centre pages of the Sun, or let alone the Sunday Sport, to be honest with you. So there we go. That hasn't changed. The medium of delivery has changed, but that bit hasn't changed realistically. So, but I did want to get first of all into the property specific consequences of the budget, because I didn't want to go on this giant macro flight of self-indulgent fancy, which it largely was, without doing that, obviously. So not loads, but the one that really piqued my interest was I was actually out of the UK this week and very, very short on time. So I had a chance to read the summary, and then I was a bit disappointed, but I didn't have the time to put together a proper response to see. There's always this race of everyone to release their YouTube video or whatever in the first 5 minutes after the budget, which puts people under pressure, because people who frankly spend a lot of their time copying other people have to come up with original stuff or copy what it says on the Guardian or the BBC website or the Telegraph or whatever. And most of the stuff, those guys don't care about multiple dwellings relief, and they don't know what it is, and they don't understand the implications of it. So a lot of what was copied and propagated, unfortunately, was wrong. But I didn't have time to get into a big ding dong about it, nor do I seek to call people out specifically online all the time. I save that for my hobby days, of course. So I thought I would leave it and write something more coherent for the weekend. So effectively, MDR withdrawn. What that means is, apart from anything else, I gave 2 worked examples of 2 portfolios I've actually bought in the past and how MDR worked, and then looked at what the commercial rate would be and what the so for people who don't know, multiple dwellings relief as it stands right now today kicks in when you buy 2 or more properties in a linked transaction. Now, HMRC definition of a linked transaction is as clear as mud as usual, but it does seem to try and catch everything. So if the seller is the same person, the same business, a director of a business, a business partner of any kind, a spouse, a relative, the hairdresser's dog, whatever it is, right, then it's a linked transaction. And it doesn't matter how you could buy a property off the same vendor 20 years after the first property you bought off that vendor, and those transactions would be linked as far as HMRC see it. So the point here is there's no way of getting around it with delayed completions and clever stuff like that. There's no way of getting around it by doing 18 different sets of legals rather than one set of legals for 18 property transactions. That's it for MDR. It is toast as far as I read the rules, right? Anyone who tells you differently, I might be quite skeptical about that, if I'm honest with you. Now, some people have said, don't get your knickers in a twist because you can use the commercial rate. And that's true. You can use the non-residential rate for transactions of 6 or more properties. So the big incidence really falls on the 2 to 5 property disposal, which of course is most landlords in number who've got more than one property. They've either got 2, 3, 4 or 5. So it affects them quite significantly because the commercial rate can't kick in. So what happens then? They go to paying still, if they're selling something under 40 grand per, then fine. Right, but that would only be one property realistically. Surely to goodness, it would only be one property, unless we're in the real back and beyond territory up in the northeast. No offence to my friends from up there, but you'd have to buy some pretty knackered stuff if you're buying 2 properties under 40 grand total, right? But I suppose it is theoretically possible. So the 2 to 5s are going to get hit the most. So I bought a block of flats once, purchase price 550 odd K. We used MDR. There were 17 units in there. Worked out as 32.5 grand a flat. It was a pretty good deal. Of course it was. That's why we bought it. And so we used MDR, and because it was under 40 grand, it was 1% stamp duty applied, right? So that was that. So now that transaction today would be at the commercial. So instead of paying 5.5 grand in stamp, it would be, I think it was 17,500 using the commercial rate because there were more than 17 units. So you can see the difference already. If you use the resi rate, it would have been more. It would have been something like 40 grand or something ridiculous. No, not quite that much, but it was over 20 grand. So big difference in the stamp. And of course, any sensible purchaser is working out their full purchase costs. So we certainly do. And that affects what we offer the vendor. I mean, it really is as simple as that. And I put the argument across that any property trader will back that up, right? If you're putting a couple of extra percent into the mixer. So instead of 1% on every marginal bit of that transaction, if that had been 300, if that had been 170 flats at 5.5 million, yeah. So instead of paying 55k, it would have quadrupled the stamp duty, basically. Because even at the commercial rate, everything above 500 grand, the marginal rate is 5%.
Yeah,
5%. Yeah. So massive difference from 1 to 5%. You know, huge difference on the whole transaction.
I think that multiple dwelling relief on some transactions it will be noticeable. But like you said, traders or people who are buying, they will just take it off there.
They will, and this is the. This is it.
If they even the thing about the multiple dwellings relief is some solicitors probably never have even known about it, and they wouldn't really apply it until they were told by someone, and they were given like an actual tax advice from an accountant saying this is how it should be done.
That is correct, but when you think about how many institutional buyers there are out there now, and really some of the only people that buying have a fairly institutional mindset, and people who are buying portfolios in general, we've moved on from the early sort of disposal days. So my second example was about a much more realistic one, where the unit cost is between 40,000 and 250,000, right? So with multiple dwellings relief, you'd still be paying 3%, but again, with the commercial rate, you're going to be paying 5% for everything above 250,000 quid. Yeah. So there's a 2% marginal difference in what you. So the buyers, the institutional buyers, are going to feel the pinch there, or as you correctly say, reduce the price that they're going to pay. And
I think my opinion is that that multiple dwellings relief being removed is more of a shot into the stamp duty relief companies that reclaim companies that try to reclaim anything on a like large mansion in London with a little annex at the back, and then they try to reduce the stamp duty by 150,000 just because there is a little tiny annex that can be classified as a dwelling or something like that.
And I agree. I mean, he did mention that in passing that it was abused, but I thought if you want to look at stamp duty that's abused, you can look well past multiple dwellings relief, because the stamp duty reliefs have been, we've spoken about it before, have been abused left, right, and centre by a lot of the traders, and it's rife and it's every day, rather than those fairly unique little single dwelling transactions. Although I do see your point there. I did make a similar. I've heard of one where someone was selling a flat in Mayfair and got rid of a buy to let in Durham or whatever at the same time, which tumbled the stamp duty down. It basically, they gave the house away for free, effectively, compared to what the purchaser was going to pay in stamp on the flat. Do you know what I mean? So there are definitely those, but they're so rare. I think it also might be that the OBR had that penciled in at bringing in an extra 350 million, and he saw that as very low hanging fruit without too much trouble, which probably is potentially correct. But he's also softened the blow to the landlords who are personal name portfolio landlords who are disposing by cutting the top rate of CGT from 28 to 24, of course. And I do think there's some psychology behind that. People have a tendency to be okay with tax until it's about 20 to 25%. Beyond 25%, they start getting hacked off. That's a psychological barrier that's been established over the years that sort of plays out in a lot of the research that's been done. So you might see, as he takes away with one, if the vendor's going to pay for that extra few percent, like we said, then ultimately they're going to get it back on the tax saving maybe, and they never know what they would have had if it was for multiple dwellings relief. So that's sort of where it is. It does make the limited company acquisition a lot more attractive, and it does make the idea of following a route where you incorporate alongside the vendor into a limited and then buy them out of the company a lot more attractive. However, that is complex. It takes time. It's not easy to set up. There's very, very few people who understand actually how to do that transaction anyway, and even fewer that I trust to actually help me to do it. So that's not an easy path. And normally people are disposing because they've had enough, and they're not going to stick around for another 2 or 3 years while you go down a partnership route before you get into an incorporation section 162 situation or whatever. So the other bit, of course, is that withdrawal of the furnished holiday lettings tax relief to bring it more into line with normal letting. Now, that I thought again was a pretty clever one, because it stops the people who are going down an SA route to avoid section 24, which is one of the reasons why SA has been sold over recent years to people who are enthusiastically buying courses about it and stuff like that. That kills that with one fell swoop. Probably puts some units back into the PRS, which is clever, I suppose, from that perspective. But the CGT thing surely lets more units out of the sector more easily. And I couldn't believe the way they framed it was just like, look, it's going to raise more revenue at 24% than 28%. This is the old school conservative rhetoric: lower the tax rate, increase the take. So it's going to do that. and it's going to free up much needed properties for the ownership sector. And it's like, yeah, it is. Yeah, that's right. What's it going to do to the rental sector, mate? Not that you care, obviously, by the way that you've said it, but it's going to take even more net units out of the PRS, which is going to make rents rise even more. And, you know, this is the government that has been, you know, the landlord's friend historically over the years. The landlords will be quaking in their boots at Rachel Reeves getting in. There's going to be people over the next 6 to 9 months who just break and say, forget this, I'm going to get rid of this before it happens, because as that pretty much concludes the property specific parts of the budget, you know, the guy at the IFS said very powerfully, effectively, I don't believe Jeremy Hunt would stick to these plans if he stayed as Chancellor. And I believe even less that Rachel Reeves is going to go through with these cuts that are going to be needed after the next Parliament. But he also said, quite bravely, I thought, that the rise in people who are on long-term sickness following COVID is a problem. And it's starting to become a problem that feels a bit like when they encouraged people in the 1980s to come off the unemployment list to massage the unemployment figures down and go on the long-term sick list. And then they started to absolutely squeeze that lemon years and years later because there were too many people on the long-term sick list, even though they'd put them there in the first place. So, of course, there's lots of people there genuinely. Of course, the vast majority are there genuinely. And, of course, it's because the NHS has not been able to cope, and industrial action hasn't helped. Of course, it hasn't. But there has, obviously, I presume now the doctors are going to hold out until the Labour government comes in the hope of getting a better deal. And the Labour government are going to need to do that deal as very quickly as they possibly can. But of course, there'll be more data by then. Inflation should be a bit calmer. It's already a bit calmer now. And there'll be more deals that have been done in other health services to benchmark that back to. And if you can keep the doctors at work, you'll get the waiting list down. That much is pretty evident, to be honest with you. And then as far as the rest of the macro goes, as I say, there is significant detail available in this week's summary. They interestingly have raised the point, without really getting into the whys and wherefores, which I've tried to get into, that real household disposable income per capita is down. Now, I've been making this argument for months that real household disposable income is up. So per household up, right, but per capita down. The only way that can happen is for there to be more people per household, right? Otherwise, the maths doesn't add up, right? So now this is a reversal of a 40 to 50 year cultural trend of there being fewer and fewer and fewer people per household, right? Why are there fewer and fewer people per household? You could point to the emancipation of women, generally speaking, right? You could point to the fact that fewer people get married anyway in the first place these days. So there's less likelihood people will stay together when the rather, much as I love mine very much, incredibly stressful situation of children comes along, and at least half the people wave the white flag and part company at some point relatively soon afterwards. You know, that's been the way that the world has gone. And of course, if you were Thomas Sowell or a particularly conservative economic thinker, you would point to the fact that the benefit system supports single parents, and therefore it's more affordable to be single parent. And sometimes it's more affordable and you're better off to be a single parent than you are to live in a couple, which is terrible behaviour for the benefit system to drive. But it has driven that over recent decades. There's no denying it. So I believe people will behave as they're incentivized, as you guys well know. So that's problematic. Now, have we suddenly seen some kind of reversal of this cultural trend? I don't think so. I think we've seen people by necessity move back in with mum and dad rather than renting because of cost of living crisis. We've got anecdotal evidence of that in our own portfolio. I haven't seen any sort of macro data from any sources that I would trust on that, but I'm pretty confident that it's happened to an extent. And also, if you remember my piece from about a month ago, which looked at the migration numbers a little bit more closely, I ended up with about 650,000 people that I couldn't work out where they were because they weren't in temporary accommodation. They couldn't be in the PRS because of the number of units, right? Which means they must be sofa surfing / staying with friends and family. Well, of course, those people would increase the number of people per household, because what you're saying is 2% of the households in the UK have got an extra person in there. Now, my argument with the OBR here is they're seeing this as a trend and they're carrying this trend on. And I disagree with that, right? Most people will want to get out of there as soon as they can. Now, of course, there needs to be stock for them to move to, but most people will still want to get out there as soon as they can, buy or rent, realistically. And also, people who've just come to the country who've come in big numbers. There's this kind of bulge in migration. You know, the 1.3 million people. Whatever the numbers settle down to, that is a big spike in the numbers, and that 1.3 million people will work its way through the system and won't be being replaced at such a high rate, even though the ONS think we're talking about 315 a year is their number from now on. I think it feels more like 400,000 a year from now on. But all these projections are a little bit fragile around all of this stuff. And I actually think, I don't know whether real household disposable income per capita is such an impact, because if any of us have a lodger, let's say, right, what does the electricity bill go up by? 5%, maybe 10%. What does the food bill go up by? It's marginal. It's at the margin. So when you live in, and that this from cultures around the world who do this, who've done this in the UK as immigrants, but also have done this, who do this regularly, like say the Spanish or the Italians, who have lots more people per household as a general rule, who suffered much more because of COVID, for example, then you're spreading the property taxes across more people and whatever incomes they've got. It's much cheaper to live that way. Now, as cost of living crisis, in my opinion, actually started to abate at the very end of 22, at the beginning of 23, in terms of what the data says, it's only coming back upwards rather than coming back to where it was per head, but per household, you're doing okay. And actually, I think it's probably not as bleak a picture as they all seem to think it is. But this is the big macro scales. The trade-off at the moment is consumption coming down more quickly than what's being inflationary behind it, like services inflation, for example, is not really calming down. But to summarize my thoughts, guess what? I think the OBR are wrong. I think they're wrong about inflation. They think it's going to average 2.2% this year. Prepare my hat with some salt and pepper if we average 2.2 this year. I just don't see it. I see it's coming down to 2 point something in April, high twos in April, and then bouncing back off that. I don't see it happening unless we're going to have a prolonged and extended recession, which is not what's suggested by the real time figures. And look, there's a few macro bits in there, but we want to do some other stuff today. We're nearly half an hour in, so go and listen to the nearly 1 hour recording, which is my record length supplement this week. It's about 58 minutes on the voice file. It's going to be a hell of a one to summarize, I tell you. And it's 9,577 words. So I'm not sorry, because I'm never sorry, but go and check out the whole thing. There's some interesting bits in there, I promise.
Amazing. A new record for you. When do you record
the 10,000. So normally I do the recording at some point on Saturday, depending on when I finished it. But this week, because I've been so time constrained, I have to actually finish the writing. I would say 10% of the time I have to finish the writing before release time. And this is the first. I actually released at 7 o'clock this morning rather than 6:30, which is the first time I've missed my 6:30 deadline for quite a long time. But there was just too much that I wanted to do. And I was tired yesterday, to be honest. We've had quite a long week, like I said, lots of travel and all the rest of it, and just thought, you know what, about 9:30, instead of trying to finish it off, I'll go to bed and I'll wake up early, which I did, which by my standards is too bloody early, really, to be honest. But finished it off, and then obviously to record an hour's voice file takes me an hour, so I managed to do that, and still sneak in preparing Mother's Day breakfast. So well done me, I say, well done me.
My God, is it Mother's Day?
Here's that. It is that.
Oh God, I'm in trouble.
Amazing. We've got a few comments from people like it's relating to the budget thing. Paul Ribbons is saying, "Money guys, yes, as traders, we build the extra stamp duty cost into calculations and adjust the price accordingly." Aston Stevens is saying, as someone who's built up 6 furnished holiday lets in my personal name, safe to say Mr. Hunt's speech on Wednesday could have gone better. Wait for fine details to be announced, then work out what to do moving forward. It's a good one. And there's a question from Graham. We can, I guess, come back to it later on. But yeah, another subject that's very timely right now is a subject of committed bias and how, or non-committed bias, and how much time would you give someone to basically draw the line and move on to the next buyer. So basically, situation is there's a client of ours, and they are awaiting. They've got this person who agreed to buy the property, and they keep moving the goal line. Exchange this week, we exchange next week, and they're not exchanging, and they're delaying kind of putting the property into an auction because of that. And like from my perspective, it's so clear. Like I see this all the time. If someone keeps moving the goalpost, they're not doing the deal. It's just a matter of starting the thing. But from your
I'd say
perspective,
less than 10% of the time they go through, don't they? Less than 10% of the time.
Yeah, and normally, if someone really wants to do the deal, you can see that it's not really down to them. They don't really need too sophisticated excuses, because you can see for yourself what the problem might be. But in situations like this, what's your advice for people who have non-committed bias?
I mean, if I was speaking to the vendor, I would say ultimately, if the person isn't doing what they say they're going to do, then you've got to communicate to them that's not acceptable. And you've got to say to them, look, final answer, final chance. There's not going to be anything else. I mean, if it was me and I was the vendor, I'd already been asking for a non-refundable deposit as soon as they started to mess around, because that's going to get their skin in the game, as Helen was going to drive towards. I think I've stolen her thunder there. Sorry, but that's what you need in these situations. If someone either A, isn't willing to put, say, 10 grand down, or B, can't put their hands on 10 grand, they're not buying a property. They're not buying a property one way or another. So there's something going on in the background. They're trying to juggle. They're trying to buy time. There might even be a longer worked. They're trying to go and get a discount later down the line as well, or they think they've got kind of a free option on the property. It messes everybody around. I had I'm looking after a deal for a friend of mine this week. I had an invoice from his solicitor for 500 quid plus VAT for the chasing they've been doing to the other side. I mean, and can you imagine how annoying that is to him to receive that invoice? And it's like, look, the buyer's paying above market value. He's got a good track record. He's got a reputation. He's had some personal circumstances to deal with. And this isn't made up. I've verified that all of this is true. But still, and he has underwritten the costs of that. So that 500 quid isn't coming out of my friend's pocket if the deal goes ahead anyway. Sorry, if the deal doesn't go ahead, it isn't coming out of his pocket. If it does, it is. But you imagine the annoyance when there's been 93 chases and a lot of this, that, and the other. And of course, my friend's concerned the guy's not going to do the deal. I still think the guy's going to do the deal, but ultimately it's easy for me to be more sanguine because I do this day in, day out. I'm hopeful that is going to go ahead. But of course, we've gone from 90% to 65%, and that's not a great place to be, you know. So I wouldn't hesitate. I mean, personally, the other point of view would be the auction market looks okay at the moment, whereas it might go not so well when the election approaches, for example. So the last thing that vendor wants to do is wait another month, lose another month, mess around. They called an election, let's say that happens, and then suddenly the market just drops off a cliff for 3 months because people get too concerned. So there's loads of risks that the vendor's taking they're not getting paid for, and I don't know why they're doing it, to be honest. But I do know why they're doing it, because they're not experienced and because they're not receiving the right advice from the people who should be advising them and looking after their people. Forget so much of the time, and auction is very good at this. Price is not necessarily the only best interest consideration, and this is about certainty. Right? This is about certainty, and at the moment, there's no certainty being provided. So if the vendor wants certainty, go with a purchaser who can provide certainty. And if you're trading off a few percent off the price you're going to get, which was never a real price anyway, by the sounds of this situation, because they're not going to go through with it, then just bloody take it. Take the auction route.
And you make a really good point, actually, about when it's your deal and you're involved with it, you're too close to it to have that objectivity. I've literally had my friend on the phone God, every night panicking. She's trying to sell a big house in South London, and it's not a dissimilar situation. I'm really concerned to me what agent she's using, if I'm entirely honest, because they've accepted an offer from somebody who hasn't accepted an offer on the place that they're selling. I'm like, why would you do that? And
I hope they're at least still marketing it. Surely they're still marketing it, Helen.
Like, they stopped marketing, and I'm like, what? And I'm like, and it came back to exactly that. I had to have the skin in the game conversation with her, kind of, but in kind of layman's terms. I'm like, they have a free option on your property. They can walk away from this at any point, and you are back to square one in 3 months' time when they, I don't know, whatever happens.
You're burning funds. Yeah, I mean, with no time pressure, there's nothing happens. Nothing happens with no time pressure.
I'm like, you get a non-refundable deposit, or you get some type of commitment from them, you know, and get the lawyer, get these solicitors speaking as well, because I don't even think a deed of sale had gone, a contract of sale had gone out. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? But again, like, if you're inexperienced, she hasn't sold a house for a number of years.
No.
You know, it's not her day in, day out. You don't know these things, and she's going on, you know, how she would treat somebody else. She's going, you say it and you do it. It's like, sadly, not everybody acts like that, do they?
It's exactly the same as this transaction. At the 11th hour, before we got to what was a proposed exchange date, which never happened, there was the inevitable renegotiation attempt, and it was it was a relatively short conversation, let's just say. And my friend was like, I can remember why I've asked you to get involved in the deal. I was like, well, it's no problem. I mean, I don't know what the guy thinks he's doing, but I come from that same school, Helen. If you said you're going to do it, you do it. Yeah, absolutely. And at this point, I used it as a bit of a stick to beat the purchaser with, because I'm like, this is what these guys are like too. They're old school. They've lost all faith in you. They don't think you can trust. It was basically a bit of a dressing down to say, and / an appeal to the ego, because I know this guy's got quite a lot of ego. It was basically like, look, mate, you talk big, but where's the? I mean, he's got some serious stuff in the pipeline, and the people behind it have got. I've done my due diligence, you know, serious to a serious level, as you might expect. But it's like, look, we also know everybody can talk and everybody can also pull out. So, you know, there's all this stuff on paper, there's all these articles, there's all these other things you're doing. But actually, if I pick on a couple of things at Company's House, oh, and by the way, I know 2 of the development funders that you use personally. So it's quite easy for me to pick up the phone to them and find a few things out, quite frankly. So don't try and BS me, because it's not going to work.
Yeah.
And yeah, we got there theoretically, but we still haven't exchanged yet.
It's honestly, it's funny, like exactly the same thing. She's like, and they've come back and they needed it to be, they've come in at the asking price after some hassles, but actually they've come back and they need 10 grand off. 10 grand in the scheme of the price of this house, let me tell you, it's pocket money. I'm like, they're niggling over 10 grand. And, you know, I had to put it in perspective of her. I'm like, listen, don't lose a sale for 10 grand. Don't lose a sale of that size for 10 grand. But I'm like, they're niggling with you over 10 grand. I'm like, I'm telling you now, they're lining you up for an exchange date drop. She's like, what? People do that? I'm like, okay, welcome to property.
And they're still looking at other places they might want to buy. They've not fully committed to purchasing this property. At least get them to underwrite your legal costs. At least get them to underwrite your friend's legal costs. I mean, because if they won't do that, then it's a very good way of getting rid of them quickly. And you just have to. I'm dealing with another vendor on a more complex deal at the moment, and everything. First conversation was January 23. Sorry, without being too much of a nose about it, everything I've said since then that might happen has happened, and she finds herself in the same position where she's actually had a good year in the business last year. But now it's only just starting to be worth nearly what she thought it was worth in 2023. And all this was because a couple of guys turned up with a full asking price offer, cash offer, then proceeded to do the bank valuation, which, yes, I realise you might think that's quite strange for a cash offer. And then Liz Truss was in power, so they pulled out. But I don't think they were ever going through with it because it obviously wasn't a cash offer. Because why was the bank valuing it when, you know, if they were having a full survey done for their own purposes, I could understand that. But instructing a bank val when you said it's cash, bit strange, realistically, bit worrying, really. And this is a £3 million sale. You know, it's not small beer. But I mean, look, it's still. I think I saw from Chris Watkins' stats, which I love, his real-time market week by week update stuff. If anybody doesn't look at them already, it's well worth doing. Only 1 in 5 transactions is falling through at the moment. It was down to 1 in 6. Well, that's really low. But still, from your friend's perspective, Helen, 1 in 6 is a very high probability. It's still 17% of transactions that fall through. So, you know, and 1 in 3 is the more longer term average. So, you know, crazy.
That's
shows something about the health of the market, though, normally.
Yeah, I think there should be videos on YouTube how to filter your buyers and how to actually choose an offer and a buyer that actually going to perform.
Do you know what we should do some, mate? We should do some.
Good. Okay, cool. Well, commitment is clearly necessary. On this question comment from Mike Sharp, saying, I'm guessing that the agent is selling the buyer's property without being cynical. If the buyer wants to buy and hasn't sold, surely that's what a regulated bridging loan is for.
Can't argue with that.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
Good one. And another one from Paul Ribbons, super active today. The reason property is stressful generally is because of the uncertainty of not knowing what the eventual outcome will be, drives people mad.
Absolutely. And you don't want to end up in a December auction at the end of the year because it'll only be me and Paul and Piotr and Jay bidding, and it's no good then, is it?
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like usually, in the auction, people, even if they have to accept an offer that's so much lower than what they initially wanted, they are so relieved because they know it's pretty much over. The deposit is taken, and it's just 4 weeks from getting all of the rest of the money, and it's such an important thing. So brilliant. Apparently Adam is speaking Coventry property in Poppadoms this coming Wednesday. Nice one, James.
James, I like the sound of that.
Yeah, it's the new wave of property events in the UK. So James Gallagher, question: is there another country in the world where it takes so long to get to exchange? Demand reservation fee, other solutions? That's really actually interesting. I don't think anywhere in the world it takes that long.
Well, James, you've clearly never been to Malta.
Oh, okay. But isn't it
Actually, I don't know.
Like...
I haven't bought or sold anything here, but everything takes 15 times as long here. So I don't know what the time frame is, but I would imagine it's not dissimilar, if I'm entirely honest. It is a whole different process, though, because so much of Malta is very much based on the UK system, but the property and how you buy and sell properties doesn't seem to be so much. There's funny things around it. So which I haven't really got my head around yet.
But I think that we were talking about this similar thing on the property auction hunters, and we're talking about the I am sold model. Of how it's kind of an auction, but it's kind of not an auction. But what's good, it's that makes people commit by paying the reservation fee, even though that reservation fee is huge, like 4.2%, minimum 6K on any kind of property, but makes people commit and makes them more likely to actually go ahead with the transaction. And it's usually, I think, probably 60% of people still don't complete within the 56 days or don't exchange contract, but they're committed enough to basically move on with the transaction and then commit to later, complete on this later. So similar thing, I think. Network auctions have released this product, and we talked about this some time ago as well, which basically makes it's not like an auction, but it makes people commit with a 1% non-refundable deposit And that 1% non-refundable deposit gives them an exclusivity for 8-week period to exchange contracts and then complete the transaction. And it's small enough fee or reservation fee that makes people actually commit and go ahead, or make an offer that they're not gonna regret, and that's easier to accept than some imaginable non-commitment offer.
Yeah.
So interesting. Rupert's saying Portugal is very quick to exchange and completion. Yeah, and that's one of the things that as well. And like, even though Portugal and Spain and all the southern countries, they're slow with everything, but when you make an offer, you have to pretty much exchange contracts within like a few days or a couple of weeks. Yeah, it's super quick.
Just on the Lisbon subject, Piotr, in general, and Rupert's comment there, I did hear this week, I was quite surprised actually. I was in a conversation where people were talking about internationally attractive destinations in terms of tax and all the rest of it. And of course, I assumed that Portugal had obviously become less attractive for the UK because they're changing the non-habitual residency rules or whatever. But from a international attractiveness point of view, Lisbon was absolutely up there in the top 5 destinations, according to an international relocation agent, because people want to be there. So it's not necessarily all tax regime driven, of course. And it was being named with some very, very, very super destinations. So that was my excuse to think I need to find a reason to come out to see Piotr as soon as possible, realistically, because I've obviously been missing out all these years.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you should get some testimonials from John Cox. He was there recently, visiting me. But I think that the difference between like Lisbon and many other places where people go to like retire or just live, like, I don't know, maybe Bali or something, like, you don't really go to Lisbon just to like I don't know, chill and do nothing. Actually, Lisbon is quite a vibrant place where there's a lot of technology companies, all that like Web3, the cryptocurrency companies, all the like. It's a super exciting area. Like, I know not much about it, but the people that are there, they're ambitious and they're creating stuff that's gonna make them lots more money than the tax that they actually might be paying. Because they're there, and some of the people that are coming, they've already like maybe sold their businesses. They've basically they already have the money to live on for several years. They don't care about making new money right now, like in paying their income on that, but they care about creating gigantic business and then selling it on for hundreds of millions. And then
this is a really interesting point about where the tax drops, sort of thing, because I was stunned the other day to learn that now UK income tax is now lower as a rule for the employee than it was in 2010. Right, so the Conservatives have brought income tax down. It's everything else they've whacked it onto in order to try and get the money back from. So I made a point in the supplement today around, there's no way the Telegraph earlier this week went into some kind of apoplectic mode, firing out articles every 2 minutes about taxes that Jeremy Hunt should cut or whatever. I'm guessing because they're seeing it as the last time they'll have a friendly face or a remotely friendly face in number 11 for some years, probably. Depending on when the election's called, of course, because if it's not sorted, then there'll need to be an autumn statement as well. But let's see when that happens and what happens. But they were going on about inheritance tax. And I think now we know inheritance tax, as far as the threshold goes, is going to be below the average house price in the UK. Sorry, it's going to be below the average house price fairly soon, right? If prices go, reasonably over the next few years. Now, of course, there is the nil rate band that was introduced for people for their primary residence. So you do effectively get 500k now if you've got a house. But so much is getting caught into, and it used to be the case, inheritance tax was kind of like, well, it's only about 4 billion quid in a good year sort of thing. Well, now it's 7, right? And I know there's been some inflation, but it's 7. And there's all this, there's a funny argument going on at the moment, because there's, on the one side of the political fence, people are going, oh, it's not fair for all the Gen Zers or whatever, they're never going to have a house and it's all really sad and all the rest of it. And then on the other side of the fence, people are going, well, actually, they're going to inherit more money than anybody else has ever inherited ever by a long way. Because once the boomers start dying off in their droves, but of course, the next bit will be what's captured by the government system in the wealth transfer between the generations. And it's going to be an interesting few years, because there's going to be some big estate taxes that come in to governments around the world over the next few years, I'm sure.
Yeah, one of the things that I was listening to on a podcast with Daniel Priestley recently was that he was saying, yeah, the boomers, they had like the easiest thing with property and stuff like that. Like they could buy property fairly cheaply, and now they increased massively in value. They've got money from that. But like the people who live now, they've got the massive advantage of having the freedom to do things whatever they want and create the income whatever they want. Because previously people had to live in one place and go to work in one place, and it was a completely different lifestyle. And I don't think the current generation would want that same lifestyle for the benefits that
I think you're demonstrably correct, because a financial advisor that I know quite well has said, you know, of all of his clients, he comes from a property background. Vast majority of his clients have got property portfolios. Even if it wasn't their main source of income, they've still built property portfolios on the side, which is why they're using him. He says of several hundred clients, you know, less than 10% the children want to carry on and run the property portfolio, because they don't like the look of the lifestyle. They don't want that. They see it more as earn income, spend income. I made this point the other day as well, which I don't really see anybody talking about. In the last 50 years, guess what? When you look at the size of Google, let's pick on Alphabet, do you know what I mean? You look at the size of Google, or you pick on you look at the size of Meta, you look at the size of whatever, right? They are bigger than quite a lot of governments in the world now, in smaller countries. They employ some of the very, very smartest people in the world. They are wired into your brain to try and drive your behavior in a certain way with the color of the notifications they use, and some of those tactics we were talking about, time pressure, skin in the game, you know, all the rest of that, right? And guess what? They're better at lifting money out of your pocket than they've ever been at any point in the past. So I don't want to get into the, you know, don't drink Starbucks because it will save you whatever pounds a month, despite the obvious validity of that point of view. It reminded me of when I used to work, when I was 18, I had a certain mentality, right? I needed to work in order to put myself through university. That was the fact of the matter. There were two ways in which I derived income, right? One was from gambling, because I was good at gambling and I was better than other people, so I could win money, right? And that was great. The other was from straightforward legwork, hard work. Worked in a pub, yeah. And what I would do, and what my brother used to do when he was old enough to come work with me, is we would encourage people to give us their shifts so we would get rotated on for as many shifts as we could have. And then we would go around talking to people saying, come on, Dave, surely you want to go out on Friday night? You don't want to work, knowing full well that Friday night was a great shift for tipping. And it wasn't, and it was that double-edged sword of, if you went out, you spent money. If you went to work, you made money, and then you earned money. And then my little cherry on top was I'd watch people put money in the fruit machines and know when they were going to pay out or not. So I had the multiple streams of income, multiple streams of bar income, if you like, at a young age. Obviously, I hadn't got that.
Wow.
The strategic framework wasn't in place, but that's what I did, right? And I would work 70, 75-hour weeks without thinking. Now, of course, when you're 18, and look, it's work, you know, the social after work was absolutely great. The lifestyle was absolutely fantastic. But I wouldn't necessarily be incredibly frugal with my proceeds, because frankly, I had pretty significant disposable income for an 18-year-old who still had his parents' roof over his head while he was off university, you know. So I wasn't massive. I didn't waste my money, but I wasn't massively frugal either. Whereas there was a guy who went, and he used to come to work, and the most he would ever do is have one drink ever after work out of his pocket, and he would make sure he paid for it out of his tips, right? And we would, as 18-year-olds do, frankly, take the mickey out of him a little bit for being like that, right? And he wasn't one of the cool gang or whatever. Not that I'm not sure I've ever been in the cool gang, but you know what I mean.
This is a cool gang.
But this guy, guess what happened? You know, he's got a fairly basic entry-level job, which he's now worked his way up through over the course of 20 years. He bought a house when he was 21. and now he's got buy-to-lets as well. And that's not an impossible route to follow in this day and age, if you still want to follow it. The last 20 years, adjusted by RPI, house prices are up 0, right? So that's a 20-year effect. And yes, they were a lot cheaper back then, but so were incomes were a lot lower. And when you look at the multiples in real terms, as I've done I've still done the most extensive piece of research I've seen on this subject that anyone has done. And if anyone wants to go into it and argue with it, they can do that. But I've not seen anybody do that yet. And I've been very happy to debate that with them, right? But there isn't that much difference in then and now in terms of real multiples versus wages. But I'll tell you what the one difference is that no one likes to talk about, right? Underwriting standards are a lot harder, because 2008 happened because underwriting standards went out the door completely. And there was this greed-fueled credit boom and everything. Insert the Big Short here, right? That's all you know about all of that, right? But what they did, which was really, really sensible as regulators, is they tightened up who they lent money to and the criteria for lending money. And what's harder now, a lot harder than it was in the 1970s or wherever you want to pick, right, is actually the getting of the mortgage due to underwriting standards. That's the hard bit, right? You can forget about the rest of it because it's largely smoke and mirrors and political opinion and personal opinion and all the rest of it, right? If you want to have a good lifestyle, make more money. If you want to make more money, get another job or work the first job. So the marginal returns you get while working above 40 hours a week have always been really significant. That is why when you go into investment banking, as Helen will attest to, right, you work 100, 110 hours a week. They try to break you. In your first year, you'd make more money working at McDonald's than you would at Goldman's. It's a widely known fact, right? But what they're trying to do ruthlessly, they're trying to discard the people as they come. It's rank and yank, right? That's what they do to survive in that. You've got to be a warrior, as you well know. And they're trying to lift the best people. And the best people doesn't necessarily mean the best researchers, doesn't necessarily mean it's the all-round side of things. It's the personality, it's the risk appetite, it's the risk control, but it's the ability to handle the swings. It's the ability to, and then sometimes it's physical characteristics that you've either got it or you haven't to an extent. It's really, really difficult to, and I would dare speculate, Helen, that since you left, that's got worse. It hasn't got better. You know, it's got even more brutal.
I would think so. I think the word that kind of springs to mind is resilience. And like I did 11 years of it. And actually, I think you're right about it's probably got worse. Like, I don't know if you remember that, but I think there was 2 series of it, that program on, I can't remember if it was Sky or BBC or whatever, but industry.
It's just about the guys who passed away because they had such a ridiculous, very sad.
Yeah, but that whole like program about kind of graduates going in at that level into investment banking. And honestly, I don't mind admitting the first episode I watched and it made me cry because it just gave me this whole different perspective on it. And I'm like, oh my God, who let me do that? Who let me just go, this is a really good career path for you.
But of course, I remember having considered going down that route and not going down it just because I was too difficult and awkward to be put in a box apart from anything else. And when I heard the 110 hours a week thing, I thought, sod that. And then I still went and worked 110 hours a week somewhere else because it was in my personality type anyway to do that, you know. But when I heard that and thought, forget about it, you know, you don't know. Your prefrontal cortex isn't formed. You know, you're 21 if you're lucky, and then it's like a drug, isn't it? The dopamine hits that you get, and the dopamine hits they deliberately give you are just something. It is, you know, an absolutely phenomenal experience for someone in their 20s to be able to do it. But getting away from the golden handcuffs or going out on your own terms or balancing your life alongside all the rest of it is, I've seen a couple of my peers do it and have maximum respect for what they've done. And they've now got nice, calm, suburban lives, you know, but that's a couple. And I knew, I don't know, 50 probably, round and about with my various networks, probably 50. And the other 48, I think, blimey. Some of them were chewed up and spat out in 6 months, you know, after working towards it for 5+ years, you know.
Brilliant.
Actually,
Well,
funny, just before this, I was meeting with a lady that's going to be on the episode that we're going to record in the next couple of weeks on burnout, and she had a similar experience in a different environment. But yeah, it's the things we do to ourselves. And actually, we were both very philosophical. Obviously, we're of a certain age, both very philosophical about it now, that it took our lives in a completely different trajectory. So actually, in some ways we're grateful for that, but it's not the most fun thing to go through.
And isn't that everything in life? There's always a way, regardless of how big the challenge is or how big the difficulties that it's given are. You've still got a choice of how you interpret it. You've interpreted that positively because you're someone who understands the power of a positive mindset and you're a positive person. Whereas people can interpret something, frankly, 10,000 times less significant as the worst thing in the world because the world owes them a living. And that's a personal choice that if you feel like that, you need to iron it out. I don't suppose there'll be many people listening to this who do feel like that because they're going to be doing something different on a Sunday morning or whenever they might listen to us. But it's a self-fulfilling prophecy in many ways. I remember the most extreme example I ever saw of that I've ever seen was a guy who was senior at Google who tragically lost his son in, I can't remember whether it was an accident or an illness or whatever. And he reframed it, so that he could have a positive and meaningful life on an ongoing basis. And that is pretty big. That is about the biggest that I've seen.
Was that Mo Gaudat? Or there were Mo Gaudat's that whole thing. He's dedicated his life to kind of like spreading happiness. It's not in a fluffy way at all, but yeah, because
it might be. He was on something pretty big, like it was like a Channel 4 news interview or something like that. Yeah, so it could well. It was pretty big,
Google, right?
Yeah,
it was the guy from Google. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, well, I can see we've got a lot of comments today. Today's been a super engaging chat by the looks of it. And I see that people have been engaging on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, pretty much everywhere, from all over the place.
Yeah,
even from Qatar.
Hi, Qatar.
I'm sure Qatar and Portugal and probably some US. Yeah,
hopefully Guy's listening. Guy doesn't normally miss it. I don't know if he's commented today, but
loads. Yeah,
not yet. Not yet, but maybe he's having a sleep. As Guy commented.
Oh, I thought I saw his comments.
Okay, maybe. All
He'll
right.
be back
Anyway,
next week, I'm sure.
Yes, definitely. But yeah, we had an Auction Buyers Club boardroom meeting this week, and we had a few guests. Yeah, it was great. We had a few guests, including Stuart Elliott from Network Auctions and Andrew Beanstalk. And Andrew Beanstalk was
already sounds like a lively one, Piotr, for some reason. I don't know why.
It was rather very lively, and it was brilliant. But let's wrap up for today. Thank you everyone for watching, engaging, making comments, and sharing this live stream with others. And we'll be back next week, and very likely we'll have Jay back.
Get your tickets for Helen's event as well. Don't forget. And if you're around Coventry, come and see me on Wednesday. Definitely.
Amazing.
Yes, property and poppadoms. Okay. And like and follow and subscribe and share and everything that you're supposed to do.
Brilliant. Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Have a lovely Sunday. Bye.